We just heard in our first reading from the book of Deuteronomy that the law of God is written on our hearts. My brothers and sisters, the law of God is within us. You and I cannot plead ignorance because the law is on our hearts. We know what's right from wrong. And just in case we needed a reminder, Jesus told us today in the gospel, love God and neighbor. Do we kill people that we love? No. Do we push the blame on people that we love? No. How do we treat those we love? By willing their own good because of who they are. That is love, to will the good of the other as other. Now, here are some interesting things about our gospel today. First, Luke is the only gospel writer to make the greatest commandment a single commandment. Matthew and Mark make the greatest commandment a twofold one, saying that first you must love God, and the second is like it, that we should love our neighbor as ourselves. John doesn't talk about this in his gospel, but you see, Luke makes it a single commandment. You love the Lord your God with all your heart, being, strength, and mind, and your neighbor as yourself. It is just as important to love our neighbor as it is to love God. Why? Because God is in your neighbor. If you truly love God, then by default, you have to love your neighbor, because God dwells within us all. Also, the point of this parable of the Good Samaritan is not about who should be cared for. Rather, the point of this parable is Jesus' demand that you and I become people who treat everyone we encounter with compassion. Everyone we encounter should be treated with compassion, regardless of their race, gender identity, career, citizenship status, who they're attracted to, social class rank, even at the very worst, a Sox fan. We are all to treat everyone we encounter with compassion. That is what Jesus demands of us when he tells us this parable. The problem with how our country and local communities have been dealing with the recent violence is being too quick to blame a certain group of people. Some want to blame a particular race and age group. Others want to blame institutions and call them corrupt. Others want to make political issues out of these events and use them as a means to make certain laws more strict. And others just sit at home and couldn't care less about any of this. All of these are the wrong response. First and foremost, we need to understand that Jesus Christ is God. He came down from heaven, was born of the Virgin Mary, grew up a human being, walked our walk, talked our talk, died our death, and then he rose from the dead. Now he is in heaven, interceding and walking with all of us. We are not alone. Jesus is with us, and he already won the battle of good versus evil. And to be honest, it wasn't even a battle, because no one can beat God. Now, once we understand that Jesus is God, and he already won, then we can put our trust, cares, and worries on him and ask him to heal these problems. Then we ask for his help. The last part of this process is the hardest, and most all of us, including myself, forget to do it. We listen. Sit still and listen for the Lord to speak back to us. It's really easy for us to kneel in our pews or at our bedside, yell at Jesus for these problems, and then leave. But we need to listen and follow his guidance. My brothers and sisters, we need to end this culture of death and this cycle of violence that we now find ourselves in. Responding to violence with more violence doesn't make sense. The greatest commandment is to love God and our neighbor. God is in our neighbor. Who is our neighbor? Look around this church. These are some of your neighbors. As you drive home today, look out your car window. You will see more of your neighbors. And next time you're on a plane, look out the window, and you will see at least the homes of your neighbors. We are all neighbors. We all have God dwelling in us. What race we are, religion we practice, people we're attracted to, presidential candidate we plan to vote for, country we live in, none of these things matter. All are your neighbor. We are called to love everyone. Keeping Jesus at the center of our lives, loving our neighbor, and showing compassion to everyone we meet is the only way we will break the culture of death and stop this cycle of violence. Please, my brothers and sisters, love one another as our Lord loves each of us.